I can't follow you, and I'm not going to follow you and give you personal protection. I'm telling you, for your own benefit, you had better turn around and get out of this area. You're not going to the courthouse in a group under the condition that you come here, and I'll assure you that.
All we would like to do, sir, is to go to the
courthouse is closed. There's no business there.
We don't want to go in the courthouse. All we want to do is go to the lawn of the courthouse, kneel in prayer, and we'll gladly return.
You take your prayers back to your church. That's a proper place to pray. Sir, I'm sure that God will hear your prayer just as well down there as it will up here, but you're not going on this courthouse alone.
Sir, whenever there are men who are in sinful conditions, prayer should be uttered wherever they are.
Well, why don't you pray where you are? Go back down there and pray. You think you're lily white? You think you're not sinful?
No.
Well, then go back to your church and pray.
Well, sir, can we pray together, you and I?
You do your praying, I do mine, big boy. You don't pray for me. I don't want you to pray for me.
Well, will you pray for us?
Because I don't think your prayers get above your head.
Well, will you pray for us?
No, I'm not going to pray for you. I'll tend to my business, you tend to yours. Now, you better move these people out of here.
Sir,
we're trying to protect you.
Sir, sir,
I don't have to love anybody I don't want to love.
Sir,
you do your own loving. You love your little niggas. I love who I please.
Do you believe in equal justice for all?
I believe in justice.
Do you believe in equal justice?
I don't believe in equal nothing. There's no two people in this world alike, and they are not equal under any terms or conditions. There's no two peas in the world alike. No two pieces of money nor nothing else.
Then, sir, are you saying that if I have a quarter and I'm black and you have a quarter and you white, then my quarter isn't as worth as much as your quarter?
That's your quarter. I'll decide,
my quarter is worth?
I'll decide what my quarter is worth. You use yours and I'll use mine.
Y'all see this shit? Again. They finna fuck with me again. I ain't finna stop for them.
Give me your other hand. Give me your other hand.
I ain't finna give you nothing. Make it a fuck. The fuck? What the fuck is you doing?
Stop it or you'll get tased. Taser.
Drop your hand.
Y'all see this shit?
Drop your hand. Give me your hand. Gun.
I just left my fucking house. Y'all trying to do all this shit.
Stand up.
How much do you got my fucking arm?
You got a concealed carry permit, bud?
Man, hell yeah. Man, you out your motherfucking mind. Bitch, I got a concealed permit. Check my motherfucking pocket. Got me fucked up.
Let me get this one.
Yeah, fit my shit up, cause I own that fucking gun, you dumbass cracker. Dumbass bitch. Check my motherfucking pack. I got a fucking license to carry my shit, you dumbass nigga. Oh,
yeah. You know why I'm making contact with you?
You
know why I'm making contact?
You stupid ass cracker. You heard the fucking racist dumbass nigga.
Making contact with you because you're wearing a mask. You can't wear a mask.
You'll notice the officer picks up the cell phone as it hit the ground, and he makes a claim into the cell phone.
You know why I'm making contact?
Wearing a mask. That was a pretense of the stop, which later led to his arrest and being charged with 3 different counts.
Making contact with you because you're wearing a mask. You can't wear a mask.
Umbrella. She's up.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So down in Birmingham, Alabama, a brother by the name of Greg Gunn was walking down the street when he was shot 5 times by the police, 2 of which were in the back. So let's go back and see what happened to this brother.
Montgomery police say the officer and the man got into a struggle a block away, and it ended in the front yard of this home with the officer shooting the man. Family members identified the man as 59-year-old Gregory Gunn. Gunn died on the scene and, according to the family, was shot 5 times.
Wrongdoing and a senseless death by the Montgomery Police Department, because my brother is not a violent person, never have been.
Boom, 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 boom.
Scott Muhammad heard the commotion and says he literally saw the lawman pull his gun and fire the shots. Muhammad says this is the phone video he took moments after the shooting. He did not know whether the officer you see here in the video was in fact the police officer who pulled the trigger.
It's like, I don't know, because there's a bush there. I don't know if he was on the ground already, but
he unloaded into him. I saw the bright like flashes from the muzzle. Everybody said was coming. They know each other. They were coming from a neighbor's house, walking across the street to his mom's house, and he was shot to death.
We're here this morning to
Shortly after the incident, Police Chief Ernest Findley held a news conference at his office. The chief said Gunn had what the officer felt was a weapon or an instrument. It turned out to be a long pole.
At that point in time, I didn't see it. It's in the custody of the state.
Like I said.
For most of the day, family and friends gathered near the scene, all in shock, all in disbelief, wondering how this could happen and why. Gregory Gunn was apparently well-respected and well-liked. He often cut people's yards here in the neighborhood, but his full-time job was in the grocery business, working at 2 local grocery stores here in Montgomery. Mark and Val?
Brian, thank you. Chief Findley would not identify the police officer involved, but he did say that officer has been on the Montgomery force for about 4 years. MPD says it will work closely and transparently with the State Bureau of Investigation.
So this brother Gregory Gunn was walking home from a neighbor's house after playing cards when Officer Aaron Smith, or as they call him, A.C. Smith, said that he was stopping a suspicious person on foot. Now, he still has never really said what was suspicious about him, but of course, I'm sure he fits some kind of descriptions of somebody who did something, somewhere. So, this Officer Aaron Smith said when he approached him, there was a quote-unquote struggle and a confrontation that lasted for a block and a half. Now, I don't really know what he mean by they got into a struggle. Basically that he pushed him and ran away before they shot him 5 times as he was screaming for help. Now, of course, we already know that this cop feared for his life. And Officer Aaron Smith said that this brother had a weapon in his hand, which turned out to be a retractable painter stick. So because he thought he had some kind of stick in his hand, he was forced to tase him 3 times, beat him with a metal baton, shoot at him 7 times, hitting him at least 5 times, 2 in the back. And because this brother may have had a retractable painter stick in his hand, that is completely justified. Then it turns out he didn't even have that. The stick didn't even have his fingerprints on it. His family and witnesses say that this dangerous retractable painter stick was already on his neighbor's porch and it wasn't even his. Not only that, this man was banging on his neighbor's door screaming for help when he was shot. Now this cop, A.C. Smith, never turned his body camera on. He never turned the lights on, which would turn the dash camera on. He said that his dash camera was malfunctioning, as it always seemed to do around the time that they kill somebody. And in actuality, we have no clue what happened that night. Anything could have happened. For him to have tasered him so many times, hit him with batons, and end up shooting him, there's no telling how long this was going on. And despite all of this, Officer Aaron Smith still feels he should have immunity from being charged with this murder.
Tonight, an Alabama police officer has been charged with murder in the shooting death of an unarmed black man. 58-year-old Gregory Gunn was killed last week. 23-year-old white officer Aaron Smith was charged with murder today. The officer stopped Gunn as a suspicious person. It's unclear why. Smith's lawyer tonight says his client will, quote, not be sacrificed on the altar of political correctness.
A solemn day for 23-year-old Aaron Smith and his family. But their attorney, Mickey McDermott, says his client is not guilty.
We believe completely that Officer Smith is innocent.
McDermott says they believe Officer Smith encountered a dangerous suspect that night in Greg Gunn.
Mr. Gunn fled and used force against this officer, threatened the life of this officer and the citizens of this community.
McDermott says Officer Smith was just doing his job as he was trained to do, and he believes the city felt pressure from the Gunn family to appease them.
We believe that these charges were brought to prevent public unrest. That makes the decision to arrest this officer political, not legal.
However, for the Gunn family,
God, we call on you this evening, and we want to say thank you for your grace and your mercy.
After a couple of days of peaceful protests calling for justice for Greg Gunn, The news of Smith's arrest came as a pleasant surprise.
God turned it around and make it good. That's it. I don't care how man do. God's got to say so.
Moving forward, they say they will remain faithful to their pursuit for truth and justice.
And we going to have faith in God, that God will guide their every move and their every step. And not only that, we're going to pray for the officer also in this case.
He still claims self-defense, and according to Alabama law, he was in official capacity as a police officer and therefore cannot be charged. Now, after that was denied, they decided to go to the Supreme Court so they could get Judge Greg Griffin to recuse himself from the case. Now, the problem they had with Judge Griffin is he made a Facebook post about how he himself in Alabama was racially profiled for walking down the street with nothing but a stick in his hand. Judge Griffin made a Facebook post saying they had received a call that someone fitting my description was walking with a crowbar. I told the officer that the thing in my hand, it was clearly not a crowbar, and walking with a crowbar is not illegal. The officer said, no, it isn't, but when we get these types of calls, they have to check things out. I soon told them that I was a circuit court judge and showed them my badge identifying me as such. Throughout the ordeal, officers were courteous. So this judge just speaking on an instance where he experienced racial profiling himself is enough for them to get him off of the case. Now, they never bring up when judges have relationships with the lawyers or the police officers involved in the case. They don't talk about how that could possibly make them biased somehow. But this judge being racially profiled is enough to make him too biased for a case where a cop shot a black person. Now, we already know about the history in Alabama, and it's not just Alabama, it's America. But they still cannot let a black judge be in a position of power in a case like this. And it's not like this judge is not playing by their rules. He's doing things by their standards. We're going by their laws. But even when we have people in those positions who actually have the ability to make a change while still being within the law, they will take that power away from that person. We see that example time and time again. They do whatever they can to take their power away. If you're a judge, they will take your cases away from you. If you're a prosecutor, it doesn't matter. Elected official, it doesn't matter. They will not let you punish them, even using their own laws and going by their rules. This is why until we're in a position to enforce our own rules, we'll be in the same situation. The easiest thing we can do is attack each other. But until we put aside tribalisms, whatever divisions that we do have, in order to come together for the things that we agree on, like not getting killed, like our children not getting killed, like our mental issues, like our health issues, like our economic issues, things that we agree on, that we all agree on, and take that money that we give away and use it for something that we all can benefit from, like building an economy, so that you can protect yourself. Because as long as there's no consequences for whatever action somebody do to you, then they'll keep doing it over and over. It's up to us to stop it. We can keep crying and begging for justice, or do what we gotta do and take justice.
He made it to the door, and the police grabbed him, pulled him out from the porch of my mother's house, and drug him to the neighbor's yard. And at that time, my neighbor across the street heard 4 shots, because he was at the door standing there looking. He heard 4 shots while my brother was hollering for my mother to help him. And then he was shot 4 times, 2 in the chest, 2 in the stomach. And my mother and my nephew opened up the door, and the police would not let my mother or my nephew assist him in any way for at least 30 minutes. He was laying there alive when the ambulance showed up, and the police, from my mother's account, my nephew's account, the ambulance showed up, and the police told the ambulance they could not come near this crime scene. And he was alive, still saying, "Mama, help me. I don't want to die." And from there, I understand that the police roped off the neighborhood. I have 10 to 15 people that was trying to get down the street to my brother because they know my mom's house is a close-knit neighborhood. And the police would not let anyone come within 3 houses length to my mother's front door. And we honestly and truly believe it's a senseless murder. And my brother laid there in the neighbor's yard and bled to death because he had no medical assistance from anyone. And there's no reason for my brother to be killed or murdered in that fashion, not only by anyone, but by the Montgomery Police Department. I believe my brother was killed and murdered for no reason at all. He was a very good person. And my family and I, the survivors of my brother, my sisters, and my other 2 brothers, we are looking for complete justice. And we want the person that committed this crime to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Because there's no reason he had to be murdered. An unarmed black man being gunned down, 2 shots to the chest, 2 to the stomach, and no one let him receive any medical assistance is an injustice to life itself and everything we believe in. And the thing I want to know is why the spot that my brother was murdered in, the police department themselves took my neighbor's hose pipe, from what I'm told, washed down the porch, the blood from the scene, wouldn't let anybody in the area. It was trash that had been sitting on the corner of his yard for 3 weeks that wasn't picked up. When I arrived here at my mom's house, all the trash, they said, was cleaned up by Montgomery PD. And that may be evidence of where he was drugged through, ran through, something. And I want to know why the Montgomery Police Department took it upon themselves, not a crime scene investigator, anyone, to get the blood, rinse the blood down, remove leaves and debris. And also, I want to be known that my neighbor across the street, he heard a lot of yelling. And his words to me was he was awakened by all this noise, and he actually told me that my brother was running toward the house, yelling for my mom, and the police pulled him back. There was a scuffle, and it was 2 officers. One officer stood there. When they separated, gunned my brother down, the doors opened to my mother's house, and they wouldn't let anybody give any assistance to the matter that was going on. And it was a senseless murder. It was murder. There's no other way to put it than murder.
That motherfucker right there needs a goddamn bullet. I'm telling you right now, if you fucking hit me or threaten my life, I would fucking kill that motherfucker, whatever I had in that fucking house. And before the police got here, I would fucking put marks all over my shit and make it like he was trying to fucking kill me. I goddamn guarantee you, what would it look like? Self-fucking defense. Fuck that piece of shit.
So, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be around sanity. As I said last year, I trounce around in the wilderness among people who think differently than I do, that I don't understand. It's good to be among people who think like I do for a change, even if it's for just a weekend. And we're working on getting more of those people around to our way of thinking.
Our general goal is to advance the social, cultural, economic, and political well-being and independence of the Southern people by all honorable means.
We're talking first and foremost about our people. And who are our people? Our people are white European Southerners.
But I'll tell you this, it starts everybody every year something starts swirling back around about it. You know, that this guy works at the police department, founder of a local hate group. And I went in and told the chief last year, I said, because I had a promotional interview and I thought for sure this was going to be brought back up again, and it wasn't. And I went back in there and I said, is there anything that you want to ask me? I said, I promise you that whatever I do, I'm going to exercise good judgment about it. I'm not going to sell out my position with the league. That's something I believe in strongly. If it came down to it, I'd choose the league. And I said, is there anything you want to ask me? He said, you just answered every question I have. And he even said this, he said, we pretty much think like you do.
Huh.
They're like everybody else you come into contact with that's not here today. They're just not quite ready to take that step. But like I said earlier, they are much closer than they were 10 or 15 years ago.
When the riders arrived in Anniston, they were met by a brutal mob which shattered windows, punctured the tires of the bus, and set it on fire.
They held the door, and I remember them saying, let's burn them alive.
It's not easy being a League of the South member either. One of the things I know when I come and be among you folks is that nobody's here for personal glory, because I hope we get to that day one day too. I hope we go and we go, you know, that guy's just here because the League of the South is so dang popular and he's just trying to ride our coattails. I hope we get to that day.
In the rest of the news, the Dothan, Alabama Police Department has apparently been planting evidence on black suspects for over a decade, according to leaked documents obtained by the Alabama Justice Project. The Henry County Report yesterday published an article describing the leaked documents and how they show that up to a dozen Dothan police officers on a specialized narcotics team planted drugs and weapons on young black men for nearly a decade. All of the officers involved were reportedly members of a neo-Confederate organization that has claimed that blacks have lower IQs and should return to Africa, and that the civil rights movement is a Jewish conspiracy. A group of anonymous officers reached out to the Alabama Justice Project with hundreds of files from the Dothan Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. According to the report, current Dothan Police Chief Steve Parrish and current Assistant Director of Homeland Security for the state of Alabama were supervising officers in that department at the time. Multiple current and former officers have agreed to testify before a congressional hearing, or if the United States Attorney General Loretta Lynch appoints a special prosecutor from outside the state of Alabama. The details of the documents are disturbing, partly because they indicate that the highest levels of the Dothan Police Department were complicit in sending thousands of innocent young black men to jail, but also because this type of criminal behavior might still be occurring in other police departments across our nation.
All right, and we back on the forecast. So down in Florida near Orlando, a brother by the name of Christoper Lewis and his wife and 12-year-old son was in their own home minding their business when they had their house shot up by the police. So let's go back and find out how this could even happen.
Developing tonight, an Ocoee family is demanding answers from police about why they stormed into their home and allegedly opened fire.
And that's a bullet hole through the screen.
And we just found out 2 of the officers involved were already under internal investigation for another incident. Tonight, we're still pushing for answers about how 2 Ocoee police officers ended up shooting at that house overnight. The family who lives there says the whole thing started when a patrol car showed up at the wrong place following a call for help that came from somebody else. It happened around 1 a.m. at a home on Belhaven Falls Drive, and that family told Channel 9's Field Sutton they're lucky to be alive. When investigators finally left the scene after 11 hours, they left behind bullet holes just about everywhere. A neighbor's security camera caught officers arriving right around 1 a.m., but what it missed was the confusion at the front door. The father told Eyewitness News he woke up to a loud banging on the door, thought it was a burglar, went out there, and yelled for whoever it was to identify themselves. But he says all he got was silence, so he went to grab his gun. When he came back, he says officers had a bright light shining through the glass.
saw that he was armed and yelled, "Gun." Late this afternoon, I asked the Ocoee Police Department if those officers had any business being at that house last night, and they tell me that is now up to the FDLE to decide because an investigation is underway. That father says the department has not apologized, even though his home was sprayed with bullets. They went through doors, walls, furniture, and appliances, all while the family laid on the living room floor, hoping not to be hit or even killed. When the gunfire finally stopped, they say police came in and handcuffed the dad, the mom, and their 12-year-old son. Tonight, we've confirmed officers Carlos Agelero and Stephanie Roberts were the ones involved. Just last week, their attorney told 9 Investigates they're both under internal investigations that predate this incident. In Ocoee, Field Sutton, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Tonight, Roberts and Anglero are both on administrative leave while the FDLE does its investigation.
So police officers Carlos Agelero and Stephanie Roberts pulled up to this family's home at about 1 o'clock in the morning and started knocking on the door. Now, the brother Christoper Lewis says he came down, asked 4 times, "Who is it?" and nobody said anything. So he went to go get his gun because he thought it was a burglar or something, which is literally what the Second Amendment is for, literally what the NRA fights for. But of course, they don't have any interest in a case like this. But apparently, one of the cops saw he had a gun through the glass and then just yelled "gun," and they started shooting up the house. Never mind who or whatever is in this house. Let's just shoot it up because we see something through the glass that looks like a gun. Now, luckily, they didn't hit anybody. Nobody got hurt. But the police who say they were responding to a domestic abuse call were at the wrong address. They say the operator gave them the wrong address. But even if you were responding to a domestic abuse call, why would you shoot the house up? Now, of course, Officer Carlos Anglero said he shot because he feared for his life. He's a cop, so of course he was terrified. And he says that his actions fit with his training that he's had. Now, even though they decide not to charge the female cop, Officer Stephanie Roberts, they do decide to charge Officer Carlos Anglero.
Now to that Ocoee police officer indicted by a grand jury for shooting into the wrong house. If you keep tabs on WFTV.com or follow Channel 9 Shannon Butler on Twitter, you saw her break the news of the indictment this morning and the fact that the officer, Carlos Agelero, turned himself in overnight. Shannon, he was indicted after the homeowner testified during those proceedings.
Well, he did, and we were told the 2 officers involved in this shooting did not testify in front of that grand jury. It is still unclear what kind of evidence the grand jury heard or why they came to this decision to only indict one of those officers. In fact, that indictment is still sealed. It's hard to tell now, looking at this home on Belhaven Falls Drive, that it was ever the scene of what's now being considered a crime. Back in February, this is what it looked like after 2 Ocoee police officers shot it up. That night of February 6th, the homeowner told Channel 9 he heard a knock at the door at 1:30 in the morning. He said he asked 4 times who was at the door. He claimed that no one identified themselves as police officers, so he got his gun. He said when the officers saw that gun, they started shooting inside his home, barely missing him. He told us they fired 9 times through the front door. Today, the family attorney said this was the right decision.
To hear that the grand jury handed down an indictment for at least one of the officers was good news for them. They've been obviously suffering and struggling emotionally.
It turned out that the officers had been sent to the wrong home after dispatchers used cell phone towers to pinpoint the caller's location. The dispatcher was investigated, but in the end, it seems the blame is falling on this one Ocoee police officer. Now, Carlos Agelero is actually still an Ocoee police officer. He is on administrative leave without pay. As for Stephanie Roberts, the one that was not indicted, she has been fired from Ocoee PD.
Now, even though both of these officers were shooting into the house, they probably cut a deal with the female officer to testify against the other officer.
34-year-old Carlos Anglero, an Ocoee police officer, is charged with shooting into an Ocoee home in the Brookstone subdivision on February 6, 2016.
Do you see the person who you saw firing into that house on that day here in this courtroom?
Yes.
And if you could, just point him out and describe what he's wearing.
It's Officer Anglero. He's in a blue suit.
Anglero and Officer Stephanie Roberts responded to Belhaven Falls for a domestic disturbance, but they were at the wrong house. Ocoee homeowner Christoper Lewis says someone woke him up around midnight, banging on his door and ringing his doorbell. Lewis testified he never opened the front door. He says he got his gun from his bedroom after no one identified themselves.
I started to dive after the first shot went past my left ear and the left side of my face and smelled the gunpowder.
The bullets hit the family's window and went through the wall. This is home surveillance of what appears to be an officer with a gun.
At the time, I assumed it was coming from the inside, but what I know about ballistics, yes, it was obvious it was from the outside.
The state introduced the officer's 9mm Glock into evidence. A crime scene tech testified that 4 shots were fired from his firearm, 2 from his partner, and 2 other bullets were beyond damage that cannot be positively identified. The family was ordered to go outside with their hands up. Christoper Lewis said he left his gun inside the home. Lewis says he never fired his weapon. Meanwhile, the state has rested, and the defense will begin calling its 2 witnesses tomorrow morning, including the defendant, Officer Carlos Agelero. Court resumes at 10 a.m.
Now, the thing about these 2 cops, they both filed claims against the police department for harassment, for sexism, and for racism. And the lawsuit said that the department could allow corrupt cops without fear of discipline, and where top brass could make racist and sexist comments, like Lieutenant Steve McCursker. And Officer Anglero, in his lawsuit, claims that because he is Hispanic that he receives harsher discipline than his white colleagues. And they both claim Lieutenant Steve McCursker compared a black officer to a monkey and told a female officer that she couldn't be promoted because she kept getting pregnant. Now, even though they did not charge Officer Stephanie Roberts, they fired her a day after she filed the lawsuit, and they eventually settled with her for $50,000. They charged Officer Carlos Agelero with a second-degree felony, and he was found guilty.
And more breaking news right now at 6. A guilty verdict slammed down against an Ocoee police officer.
Carlos Agelero told the jury that he shot into the wrong home because he feared for his life, but the jurors came back with a unanimous verdict. West 2's Gail Pascal Brown joins us live now from the Orange County Courthouse. Gail.
Yeah, it took jurors less than 2 hours to come back for a guilty verdict for Carlos Agelero, the Ocoee police officer. He has been found guilty of shooting into a house, in fact, the wrong address during a domestic disturbance call in Ocoee 2 years ago. Police were sent to the wrong address in the Brookstone subdivision instead of a house a half a mile away. Today, the officer took the stand in his own defense, but it only took jurors an hour and a half to come back with a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Carlos Agelero, guilty of the charge of shooting at, within, or into a building in violation of Florida Statute 790.19. So say we all.
Now, the 6 jurors were polled, and it was a unanimous decision. Sentencing for the Ocoee police officer has been set for March 27th at 10 a.m. here at the Orange County Courthouse.
Now, as many Hispanics, especially police officers, who try to fit in with the white dominant society and try to uphold its values and uphold its laws, somehow that I fear for my life doesn't work as effective as it does for other groups of cops. And we have to pay attention to how these other groups jump back and forth over that minority fence. Sometimes they're over here with us when it benefits them, then they're over there with them when it benefits them. When it comes to whatever benefits there are from what our ancestors fought for, then they're on our side and they want to fight for equality and social justice. But then be those same people who will turn around and defend people like George Zimmerman or the cop who shot Philando Castillo, Officer Jimenez. At the end of the day, we have to learn that we are all we got. Plus, we can't help no other group if we can't help ourselves anyway. We don't have time to be caping for nobody but ourselves right now. But I'm glad that this family is all right, and they had no problem getting a guilty verdict in this case. But we got to put our tribalism to the side. We all we got. We can't fight over our beliefs and petty differences. We can't afford it. We aren't the only group who does that. We just can't afford to do that.
Breaking news, a jury just convicted a former Ocoee police officer of shooting into the wrong home. Channel 9's Shannon Butler sat through the trial, and Shannon joins us live. Shannon, the jury ruled Carlos Agelero was at fault even though the dispatcher sent him to the wrong house that night.
Yeah, they clearly thought that that wasn't a big enough mistake to allow this officer to shoot into this home. Clearly, they took a look at this evidence, and even though that homeowner had a gun, he was not a threat to the Ocoee police officer. Carlos Agelero had very little reaction in the courtroom today as that guilty verdict was read. He is facing years behind bars, and the family who did testify in this case, not here in the courtroom as that verdict was read. They have been here for the last couple of days. Now, earlier today, the defense attorneys really tried to explain to the jury that he was in fear for his life, and that is why he fired. But the prosecution had a strong defense saying that you just can't fire into some innocent family's home blindly.
Doesn't get to play God like that. What he did is he fired into that house when he shouldn't have. And actions have consequences. His actions equals a crime.
Everyone is operating on fear, on adrenaline, and with one desire, to stay alive.
Now, Ocoee police just sent out a statement. They said they know about this verdict, that after this happened, they did take a look at their policies and procedures, but they didn't say if they had made any changes. They said their case now is closed. As for the homeowner, we know that from the beginning, they have been considering a civil lawsuit against the city of Ocoee. Anglero will be sentenced now in March.
Right now at 6 o'clock, a fired Fort Lauderdale police officer testifies for the first time in his own defense about sending racially charged text messages. James Wells was fired along with 2 other officers. A 4th resigned. A 3-day arbitration hearing for Wells just ended at City Hall, and that's where we find CBS 4's Joe Murray again tonight with more on what he had to say. Joan?
Good evening, Elliot. Well, it was an extraordinary moment because from the time this scandal broke a year ago, we've never heard from any of these officers about what was behind those questionable text messages. So now it is up to an arbitrator to decide, was he out of line on the force?
State your name, please.
James Wells. Out of the gate, James Wells insisted he is not a racist.
Do you have a negative opinion of African Americans?
Absolutely not. The first time Wells has spoken publicly about the scandal that led to his firing as a Fort Lauderdale police officer last year. He's trying to convince an arbitrator his dismissal wasn't fair and he should be reinstated.
Jimmy, what would Big Dad do to that end? Get that end out from under the wagon, and then James Wells' text messages and that end lover in the wagon.
Investigators say Wells exchanged racially charged messages with 3 other officers and an offensive homemade video violating rules of conduct and code of ethics. Under the watchful eyes of community members he once pledged to protect and serve, Wells said the texts are not who he is.
I enjoy helping people.
Wells said extensive use of the N-word refers to a specific type of bad guy.
The worst of the criminals. Not a specific race, not a specific gender.
In a grilling that lasted hours, Wells said some of the texts are taken out of context, and often he was quoting from the movie Django Unchained, which deals with slavery.
Not only did I think, I thought I was assured privacy in this conversation.
Pressed by the city's attorney to admit what he said is wrong, Wells acknowledged police officers are held to a higher standard.
Can you think of any of these comments that you use that would go over as a part of team building, community building?
No.
After it was all over, Wells gave his wife a big hug. She has been here every day for these proceedings. What happens next? Well, both sides will submit closing arguments, and then the arbitrator has 30 days to render an opinion on whether Wells should be reinstated on the force. We'll keep you posted.
A Burns Middle School teacher has been placed on administrative leave over a controversial test that was given to some 8th graders. Parents say that test included questionable language and subject matter that just did not belong in the classroom.
Fox 10 News investigative reporter Renee Dials has been looking into this allegation. She's in the studio now to tell us what she discovered. Renee?
Well, Bob and Lenise, everyone to whom I showed this test say they can't believe it was actually given to students. It's a 10-question math quiz that highlights prostitution, drugs, and drive-by shootings. I talked to parents and several students who confirmed they were given the quiz on Friday. Some of the kids thought it was kind of funny, but their parents aren't laughing.
Well, my son, he took a picture of it in class and he texted it to me, and I was blown. I couldn't believe it.
Erica Hall says her son sent her a text photo of the quiz his 8th grade language arts teacher passed out Friday. Hall says even the kids thought it was some kind of joke.
Took it as a joke, and she told him that, it wasn't a joke and that they had to complete it and turn it in.
The Halls headed to the school today for some answers. This is a copy of the test Hall says her child was given. After outlining the math for a problem involving an AK-47, question 1 asks, how many drive-by shootings can Raymond attempt before he has to steal enough ammunition and reload? Question 8 reads, Tyrone knocked up 4 girls in the gang. There are 20 girls in his gang. What is the exact percentage of girls Tyrone knocked up?
Wow. No, ma'am. Unacceptable.
Kanitha McMillan is also a parent at the school. She says she wouldn't want the test given to her 6th grader. I also showed the test to Kelly Lee. She didn't realize her daughter Peyton was in the class that received the test.
My language arts teacher gave it to us to work, and I was kind of laughing at it because I thought it was off.
I'm shocked. I can't believe that's something these questions they would ask children. I don't think this is appropriate at all.
I did some research to try to find out where this test originated, and what I discovered is that it apparently has a long history. Similar versions of the 10-question quiz have been turning up in classrooms across the country since the 1990s, and a lot of teachers have found themselves in hot water over the test in several states, including Texas, California, and New Mexico. And the Mobile County Public School System may be next on the list.
No, she's been there for a while. My son said it is actually her last year. She's retiring.
The school system has not released the teacher's name. We're told after the parents visited the school this morning, the principal checked out the allegations. A school resource officer investigated the matter, and the teacher was immediately placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation.
You see it? What's your name? I can't see your name. Here I do. What's your probable cause to ask for my name? Because you're being criminally trespassed from this property. Okay. Can I see your ID, please? No, you can't. Why is there something against me seeing your name but you give no mine? You got to have probable cause to ask somebody's name. This man needs to go to jail for criminal trespass. You're under arrest.
Wow, he need to go to jail for criminal trespassing.
Hey, y'all give me a hand.
Wow.
Let go of the helmet. Let go of the helmet. Let go of the helmet. Look, I ain't getting nothing, man.
Criminal trespassing at Walmart? For real? We were just sitting here talking.
Take him down. Tasing. Tasing.
It's hazing?
Hey, man.
For real, man? Really?
Oh, back up. Back up.
Okay.
Back up.
I'm backing. I'm going back. You ain't gotta touch me. Wow.
Goodbye. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
Wow.
Hey, I got one arm right here.
That's ridiculous. You just gonna keep tasing him.
Fuck, man. Man, this shit, man. What the fuck is going on? Y'all part of this protest? Man, need to leave. Need to leave right now, or you can go with him. Leave right now, or go with him. Oh, shit! Let's go. Go.
Whoa, man.
Turn around.
Really? I'm moving. This is my fucking car. This is my car right here.
Ran out of time.
This is my car. Wow.
I got one.
I'm moving. I got my hands behind my back, man. Wow, man. I was getting in my car. This is my car right here. This is my car.
You ran out of time.
I ran out of time. I was backing up. You told me to leave and I was going to my car.
Okay.
Wow, man.
Tough shit. That been patted down there.
All right, and we back on the forecast, and I want to say RP to the brother Gregory Gunn, and this is just another case another clear example of why we need to take the power into our own hands and do what we have to do. We are the only ones that can give ourselves justice. We have to start responding with urgency. They have enough urgency to stop a judge from presiding over a case because he was racially profiled before, in the same way that the person who was murdered was racially profiled. All of a sudden, they talk about biased judges. And even though they are charging these police officers more, we can't be fooled. We see they keep pushing the case back further and further. All of these different cases, they push the date back further and further. And in this case, until they get the black judge to recuse himself. But as long as we fighting each other, pointing the finger at each other, arguing about dumb shit, they can continue to violate our rights, our human rights, our civil rights. And there's many groups that want to jump in front of the white dominant society to protect it. They'll throw you right under the bus along with everybody else. But we have to worry about ourselves. We have to worry about protecting ourselves. We have to worry about building our nation and giving our children a place to live, a place to thrive, so that a family can be at home and not have to worry about the police shooting up their house and then coming in and putting everybody in handcuffs. And as soon as we decide we've had enough, then we can finally start moving forward and doing something about it. So, as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.